All right, welcome everybody to another session where we talk about weight and force lifting a heavy object. My name is Denis Dvoryankin. I've been animating for a little bit over 10 years professionally. I actually graduated Animation Mentor back in 2013 and since then been in VFX industry. I had a pleasure to work in some of the studios like MPC, Framestore, Sony, and most recently I'm a senior animator at Image Engine. One of the last films I worked at actually was Fantastic Four, where we had a pretty big character and we always had to think about how to make him look heavy, as long, among other things, as picking up heavy things and how to sell that idea. So I'm going to go over a couple of tips, a couple of suggestions to keep in mind when you're blocking or shooting reference for your animation. So the first thing it's important to understand is what is force, right? So force is a push or a pull upon an object. It is what causes a change in motion. So whether we want to start to move a stationary object or we're slowing down, even if we're changing the direction the object is moving, we need to apply force towards that object, which means it always is an interaction between two objects. So keep that in mind when you're working through this. There are many forces, and some of the examples is like gravity or frictional force. But in our specific scenario, we're going to be thinking about the applied force towards that heavy object to make it go from stationary to a moving pickup, right? So the couple of things that I think about when I'm starting off animating, right? The first thing is how heavy the object. So there's a difference between 20 pounds, 60 pounds, or 300 pounds, right? So keep that in mind when you are animating it. Most of the time when we do this assignment in our body mechanics class in Animation Mentor, and I always recommend my students to go for a heavier object, right? We want to sell this force, this struggle as the character going through as they pick up the heavy object. Another thing to keep in mind is who is performing that action, right? So in Animation Mentor, we have a couple of different characters there, and all of them, even if they're picking up the same object, a lot of them are going to be experiencing, they have to apply a different amount of force and struggle to get that object picked up, right? So think about a superhero picking up something versus a regular person, right? The struggle and the force, body positioning, the poses, they are going to vary. In our scenario, we're going to be talking more about a regular person picking up a heavy object. So a couple of pointers to think about when you are either planning or you're starting off on this type of action. So the first thing is don't rush that action, right? If the object is heavy, it will require extra effort from you or the character to start that object moving from the stationary position, right? A lot of times you might apply some force and it's not enough, and you have to apply and struggle to get a bigger lift happening there. So it's important to not rush it. A lot of times I see, especially when starting animators are posing out the character and they're not taking into consideration, and the action goes a little too fast from one pose to another, especially at the beginning of the lift, right? It's important to give yourself and the character the time it needs to apply that force, to go through the struggle. In turn, that will sell the weight of an object. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. Another thing that I always like to do is use visual cues, right? So visual cues such as your shoulders being pulled down, right? Because the object is pulling yourself down there. Your arms are being straight because you're not strong enough in your bicep to lift up that object, and you need to use the strength in your joints in order to lift and start that motion. Those kind of things are very important to try to introduce into your animation as much as possible. So there's a couple of cues you can do, and the more of those are present in your animation, the more visually it's going to look like it's a heavy object. Body positioning, right? How you are in relation to an object, whether you're lifting it up from the side or you square on. Think about lifting a couch, for example. If you're lifting a couch, it's pretty heavy, so chances are you're not going to be doing it from the side with a bent arm. You're going to approach your couch straight on, you're going to lock out your arms, and you're going to do the lift that way. So two different approaches, and right away will tell me that this is a heavy object if I'm more straight on, closer to the object as well. Thinking about how much effort is being used. This kind of comes in mind with who is doing the heavy lifting. Is it a strong character, or is it more on the weaker side? So depending on that, a different amount of effort will need to be used. So a lot of times when it's something that's very heavy, I want to spend some time to show that the character is struggling with the weight. They don't just come up and pick it up, even if it's a slow pickup. They come up, they might do a first attempt, maybe they struggle a little bit more, maybe they realize that, hey, this is a lot heavier than I thought. I need to do a different grip on this object, right? Maybe I need to go underneath that object. So showing those things, again, will highlight how heavy that object is. And lastly, one of the other things I think about is the relationship between the object and the character during that action. How far away is that object? If the object is too far, it immediately will give me the sense of it being light. The closer it is to you, the closer it is to the center of gravity, to your hips, it immediately gives me the idea that it is a heavy object. If you're positioning your character above the object and you try to, for example, spread the legs and be more like a tripod to have a more of a balanced position, that is another visual cue that tells the audience that this is a heavy object, the character is struggling with it, and it needs to exert extra amount of effort to lift it up. So all those things are important, and you need to try to highlight or include that in your animation as well as your reference when you're starting on this assignment. So I shot a few references here to show you differences in body positioning, how I'm holding an object, and how I'm picking up an object to visualize the difference between the heavy and the light. And we're going to start off, for example, with something that's very light, right? And you can take a look at it. What exactly makes it light? So let's take a look at this first one here, right? So look how I'm lifting it up, how quick it was, how easy it was. I didn't put a lot of effort. I can switch the arms between an object. I can swing it on my shoulder. Doesn't really have much effect on my body, right? And if you notice too, I'm even picking it up with one finger here, right? So how many fingers I'm using, right? Am I using one hand? Am I using two hands? All of that is another visual cue that you can use. Notice I don't even have both of my feet on the ground, right? I'm only standing on one foot. I just swing the other foot for the balance. Take a look at that. My leg is straight as well, right? I'm not bending that leg. That's another visual cue that to you as an audience tells you that this is probably a light object, right? As well as the amount of movement that this bag has. So as we're moving on, let's take a look at what happens later on here, right? So I'm using one arm now. And notice the weight of the bag didn't change. I'm just acting on it, right? But immediately, right? Both of my feet are on the ground on this one here, both my feet on the ground. I'm still picking it up somewhat from the side, right? So you can tell that it's not that heavy, but it's still heavy. Maybe it's a grocery bag, right? So I'm picking it up there. I'm introducing some bend in my legs now, right? I'm using all my fingers to wrap around the grip there. I'm doing it slower is another thing to keep in mind. And now that the bag is heavier, it has more effect on my body. It has more effect on my balance. So what do I need to do? I need to start counterbalancing that, right? I need to go the opposite way. So I'm bending myself a little bit more towards screen right to counter for the weight of the bag. My weight is probably shifted as well a little bit more towards screen right. And if your character has facial controls or anything like this, you can start incorporating some facial performance in there. Perhaps your neck is flexing there too. You'll probably see it more in the next example there, right? Another thing to keep in mind is, what are your shoulders doing, right? If it's something heavy, chances are it's going to pull on your shoulders down, right? So if it's a heavy object, you're not going to be shrugging like this too much, right? Because you're introducing so much tension into your neck, into your shoulders, and you want to use the strength of your joints in order to help you lift something that's very, very heavy, right? So you see the difference right there. Right away, my shoulder is being pulled down. You can tell that there is weight being applied to it as it starts to affect my body. Now this one here, heavier object, right? So we're increasing the weight of the bag. First thing, I'm square on, right? I'm positioning myself exactly squaring to the object to make sure I'm using my core, I'm engaging my body, right, to pick up this heavy object. Both of my arms are now being used because I know that one arm is not going to be enough, so I need to incorporate both arms for this motion. I'm locking up my elbows here. I'm pulling down my shoulders. Again, trying to show that this is heavy. Check out the bend in my legs. It's a lot more, right? Because I'm thinking it's going to be heavy. I need to start using more of my legs and not just my back, for example, right? You probably heard it a lot. You don't want to be using your back to pick up heavy objects. You want to be doing the lift mostly with your legs. So keeping a nice straight back always helps you out to present another visual element to the audience that will tell them that this is a heavy object. Notice the struggle, right? I applied that first amount of force that I thought would be enough, and I'm realizing that it's not enough. This is a lot heavier object. So now I go back, maybe I readjust my hand, maybe I double check the object. Now I start applying extra force, and what do? I get myself closer to the object. I have to readjust myself, rethink about it, right? So now that I know it's going to be a little bit more heavier, getting that straight back, shoulders down, more bend, being on top of an object, all those things help me out. Look at my face, right? You can also sell that struggle with your facial performance a little bit, right? You don't want to be happy, easygoing, like it's no big deal. You want to show the struggle in your face as much as you are showing it in the body as well. If you have control over your neck, great opportunity here to introduce some tension in your neck here. Again, it will sell this feeling that the object is heavy. Notice as I'm moving with an object too, I'm doing it slowly. I'm not rushing it. I'm trying to keep my object as well pretty close to myself. Readjusting the grip is another great example to show that it's a heavy object. Here's a few things that you can do to adjust, right? Going from something that just holding it back, right? Pretty default position. I'm straight, my back is straight, posture is pretty straight, legs are straight, right? They're not bent. All this tells me this is not heavy. right? A couple of things we can do, a couple of things we can adjust in this pose to show that this is heavier object, right? First thing, counterbalance, right? Right away, I'm leaning back a little bit because now I have this heavy weight in front of me, right? Whether it's a pickup or not, now I have to counter that weight just a little bit more. Spreading my feet, creating a bigger base for myself, that I'm more balanced. I can adjust my weight safer, right? I have a bigger base for any action, whether it's a pickup or just holding it. As well as having the difference between straight arms and bent arms, right? If this was super heavy, chances are I'm not going to be able to do this with just my biceps, and I need to straighten my arms. This is critical when you're lifting it from the stationary position, right? Think about the Olympic weightlifters, right? When they lift up that bar, they're locking out their arms, the elbows are straight, there's no bend in there because they're relying on some of the strength in their joints to help them lift that. And again, the difference between the shoulders, right? Shoulders and the neck too. It is important, like where are you looking? If you're picking up something heavy, chances are you're not just going to be looking around, oh hey, it's no problem. You're going to try to focus, you're going to try to have a nice balanced posture in there, so there's going to be limited movement in your neck as well. And I also like to think about where I'm holding an object, right? Whether you're holding it on the top, if it's a heavy object, chances are you're not going to be holding it sideways, and you actually need to hold it underneath it to use your fingers to have a better grip. So even though the object is far away from me, there's a big difference between where you're holding it and then the difference between bringing it in, it becomes heavier, and it becomes even heavier when I drop an object, I'm locking out my arms, and I'm again using my usual visual cues as an element to sell the weight. Another thing to keep in mind too is the bent legs, right? Think about your body as a spring. So when the spring is in its default position, it's extended, and the more force you apply towards your spring, the more it is compressed, right? The more it is trying to push away from that feeling. So the same element, the same principle can be applied to your body. So compressing your legs, not having them straight, again, will sell the idea that you are now taking on the weight as you're picking up that object. So another thing too is we've talked about the relationship between the object and your character. So notice here, I'm picking it up, I'm hinging from the hips, right? I'm quite far away. Notice where my feet are, where my center of gravity is, and where the object is far away. And I'm picking it up, I'm just hinging from the hips, using my back mostly to pick it up, right? Straight arm, and I can just lift it up. All that lift tells you as an audience that this is a pretty light object. I'm not exerting a lot of effort, I'm not struggling, and I'm not applying a lot of force to pick up this object. Moving on to the next example, I'm going to start adjusting it, right? I'm going to go on top of an object, I'm going to position myself a little bit closer, have my feet wider, trying to do that tripod effect, right? Having myself more balanced. Notice that my center of gravity is a lot closer now. I'm trying to be directly above an object. So the force I'm applying is not going sideways, but is going directly up, trying to lift up a heavy object, again, highlighting the weight of it. I'm using an arm for balancing because I already know that it's going to be pulling me forward there. And notice this first struggle right here, right? Right away, I know it's heavy, so I'm going to apply what I think is enough force to pick it up, and it's not enough. I'm struggling, right? I'm struggling to pick it up. It's not coming off the ground. My face is struggling. I'm trying to do the lift, but it's not happening there, right? Having that element, having the element of struggle immediately or right away tell the audience that it's a heavy object. And as I'm about to come up here, as I'm doing my second effort, notice how slow I'm lifting it up, right? It's heavy. I don't want to go fast. I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to pull a muscle. So I'm applying this nice and steady force to pick it up. And what do I do immediately? I use my second hand to help myself out, right? And right away, the object again is underneath me. One more thing I could have probably done here to increase that, I could have bent back more to show that I'm countering that weight again. It's another element I could have used to help improve this pose. Let's see what I do in the next one. Right, so in the next one, I'm going to use both hands immediately, right? So it's another, it's even extra heavy. Here we go. I'm picking it up there. Here, I'm using this extra, I'm actually counterbalancing, right? I'm leaning back a little more, countering for this extra weight that I have on the bag here, right? So it's another element that you can incorporate there. And notice here too, this kind of more goes towards of dropping a heavy object instead of lifting it. Notice there's a part where I'm giving up, right? As I'm about to put this down, the object comes down pretty fast because there's a point where I no longer want to be using my force. I no longer want to be applying that force, holding it up, right? And this also sells that this object is heavy, right? So keep those things in mind when you are going through this. It is important. As you introduce these elements into your animation, you will see that the object appears a lot more heavier. So I have a couple of examples from two students that are in my class. I just had them previously. So I teach a body mechanics class, and this was their take on this one. So if you take a look at it, this was a work in progress, right? So notice all these elements we've talked about, right? That initial force, you're going in there, you're trying it out, right? It's not enough. You're like, okay, no problem. I need to come in a little bit closer, get a little bit more square on, straight back, right? Getting that nice straight back there, straightening out my arms. Another thing that's very important is to make sure when you guys are doing the heavy weight lift, make sure not to introduce a lot of bend in your wrist. This is a strong wrist. You want to line it up with your forearm. As soon as you start introducing the bend in your wrist, you're compromising. This is a weak area. So you don't want to be having too much bend happening here. And it's very important to sell that feeling there, right? So as the character comes in here, as it starts applying this force, you can tell it's a heavy object, right? And you try to have it come up as straight, as close to the body as possible. Another example that I have here, similar, same assignment, right? Picking up a heavy object. This is a little bit more cartoony, so you can tell there's a little bit of a speed up that happens towards the end there, but it's still the initial force, the initial lift there. There's nice struggle that happens right here. You can tell as the character comes in, it tries to pick it up. It realizes it's not enough. It starts to increase the effort to do the weight lift, and all those cues, they sell the feeling that it's a heavy object, right? So it's very important to try to use as many of these things in your animation as you can, and it will help you sell this feeling. So again, just to recap, slow down your action, right? It's important to give yourself time. Make sure that you have things like straight arms, shoulders pulling down, right? Positioning your body. Are you straight on, doing it on the side? Are you using both hands or one hand, right? How much effort? Are you able to lift it up on the first try? Or do you need to readjust yourself and give yourself and allow yourself an extra effort, extra force to pick up that heavy object? And the relationship, are you keeping the object close to yourself or far away from yourself? We want to keep it low. We want to keep it towards the center of gravity to sell the idea that it's heavy. It's not easy to manipulate. and it requires extra effort and extra force to get it going from a static, stationary position. All right, so these are the few tips that you can use when you're animating a heavy weight lift. Hopefully it'll help you out. Otherwise, guys, feel free to check out some more help sessions that we have in Animation Mentor there. They're all worthwhile, and hopefully you enjoyed this quick little presentation. See you later.